Welcome to this day of light and gladness. We gather together today to welcome a miracle, for Easter is a holiday of miracles. It is life from death, joy from sorrow, celebration from mourning. Easter reminds us that all is never lost, that the story continues as long as we were able to tell it. So gather up your worries. We are going to bury them beneath the ground and watch them transform into flowers of hope, pushing through the earth, reminding us on Easter morning that love brings us back to life, calls us from sadness, from grief, from anxiety, into a world renewed and alive and filled with joy once again. Come, let us worship together. This morning, we invite Michael Milano and Wayne Sardis to kindle the flame of our common faith.
Today, we celebrate new life in ways that highlight our incredible sameness and our incredible differences. We celebrate miracles when the unimaginable happens. We celebrate holy, the unimaginable triumph of good over evil. Isra and Miraj, the unimaginable two-night journey of the Prophet Muhammad from Mecca to Jerusalem to the heavens. Passover, the unimaginable freedom of the Israelites after 430 years of captivity. Easter, a celebration of the unimaginable life after death, and how we all long for life after this season of COVID. And among so many miracles, we celebrate spring, when unimaginable new birth literally springs from the earth after a long time of gestation and quiet. As members of All Souls, we celebrate these holy days not as outsiders or onlookers. We celebrate them with others. Because there are celebrations also, we are part of an interconnected web. It's time to light our beloved chalice to remember the unimaginable, that we too are miracles.
Good morning, All Souls, and a very happy Easter to you all. I know that this holiday is very special to many and that we all hold many traditions around Easter. And some of them look different this year and some look the same. This year, we're happy to still bring you joyous organ and as high church as All Souls gets, and some very memorable hymns that are always sung on Easter. This morning, I invite you to join in singing our opening hymn, All Creatures of the Earth and Sky. The text will scroll on the screen as the hymn plays. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Welcome to All Souls Church. My name is Morgan Duncan, and I get to be your worship associate this beautiful Easter Sunday. For 200 years, our congregation has sought to live up to the vision inherent in our name, All Souls. It is a vision of a human community where all people are welcome at the table, where the divisions that separate us in our daily lives come tumbling down, and we recognize ourselves as part of one human family. We are a Unitarian Universalist congregation, diverse in many ways, but united in our belief in the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and in the obligation to express our faith through acts of justice and compassion. I want to extend an especially warm welcome to all who are joining us for the first time. If you'd like to be added to our e-newsletter mailing list, send a direct message to Gary Penn in the chat, and do stay on afterwards for coffee and conversation. In an effort to acknowledge and support Indigenous communities, it is important to recognize the land on which our church stands. The closest tribe was Nacotchtank, from which the name Anacostia is derived. They were part of the Piscataway group of tribes. We acknowledge that Indigenous peoples were here before us, are here with us now, and will continue to be with us as we look toward the future. Let's take a moment of silence to reflect on those whose land we reside, and in our individual and collective locations around the US and our planet Earth. If we were in the sanctuary, this is the time we would turn and physically greet one another. We can still do that, only in a ritual we are calling beholding. We invite you to remain on mute, but to scroll through the gallery of faces. Feel free to greet one another in the chat as we express our joy at being here together.
Good morning, All Souls. I'm Dolores Miller, the Director of Religious Education. The All Souls theme for April is miracle. There are many stories from ancient times that were told to explain the miracle of springtime with its resurrection and new life. One of these stories is the story of the sun goddess Amaterasu. The story of Amaterasu is from an ancient Japanese book called the Kojiki. It is in the midst of the Kojiki where the roots of the Shinto religion can be found. Long, long ago, high in the heavens was the land of the gods and goddesses. It was a peaceful land ruled over by the sun goddess Amaterasu. Amaterasu was a kind and gentle ruler. She had a younger brother. His name is Susanoo. One day, Susanoo called up to the heavens.
Please, sister, may I come up and live in the heavens with the gods and goddesses?
My dear brother, you have a habit of causing mischief. If you are to live in the heavens, you must promise to behave.
I promise.
But before long, Susanoo was back to his old ways. Soon he was stomping through the lands, wrecking the gardens and destroying the canals.
Little brother, you promised me you would behave. You are causing others to be upset and angry. You must stop.
Sorry.
One day, Amaterasu gathered the knitters and the quilters and the sewers into a room so they could weave a special cloth for the gods. All of a sudden, Susanoo threw a large, heavy ball right into the sewing room. The workers flew in all directions. Most of them were badly injured. Amaterasu was sad and very angry. She ran to hide in a cave. But Amaterasu was the sun goddess. Without her presence, there would be no light. No crops would grow.
Sun goddess, please come out. We need your light. And your warmth.
Now, everyone knew that Amaterasu loved a party, so they decided to throw a big party hoping that she'd be curious enough to come out. And sure enough, she was. When Amaterasu came out and realized that she had left everyone else in darkness, she knew she couldn't hide anymore.
I will never leave the world in darkness again. Susano, you are forever banished from the heavens.
And all was right in the heavens.
Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun. I say it's all right. It's all right. It's all right.
I love those stories. Oh my gosh. I just have to say something. Yay! That was awesome. Dolores, all the participants, and Gary for putting it together. Hello, I am Reverend Louise Green, your Minister of Congregational Care, and I'm so glad to be with you on this Easter day. After the service today, we invite you to stay for either social time in coffee hour in small groups or our after hour series, which today is with Reverend Kathleen Rolands and a conversation about today's sermon. Both those options are from right after the service until 12:30. We have a few monthly drop-in covenant groups, and the next one is tomorrow, Monday at 1 p.m. with Reverend Rob Keithan. The group will explore the church theme for April, which is miracle. All are welcome. The Zoom info is on the church homepage calendar. I will be away this week through next Sunday, enjoying spring staycation with my spouse, Regina. And so for anyone that needs pastoral assistance, or if you would like to be on the congregational care list, please contact Reverend Kathleen. We rejoice that Mel Hardy came home yesterday from a rehab facility. I think I just beheld him in the beholding after some weeks of medical issues. I spoke to him yesterday. He was delighted to be home at last. And our love goes to Mel and Juanita and lots of healing blessings their way. Special welcome back to our executive director, Tracy Hughes Trotter, whose 2 wrist casts came off, and she is back to work. We wish her well in the steady recovery process, which involves less action on the computer. We're thinking of front desk staff David Lindsay, who is also back from Florida after seeing his mother, Adassa Brewery, in hospice care in a nursing home. I'm inviting a card shower for David, so please send a card of encouragement to the church for him, excuse me, and you could wish him a happy 70th birthday year as well. Sincere condolences to Dave McMillan, whose brother-in-law Terry died this last week in hospice care for cancer. We are thinking of Dave, his sister who lost her husband Terry, and the extended family as they work through the arrangements. And now your names, your situations into this space, either spoken in your heart or offered in the chat. A time for a moment of shared silence. We hold in our hearts today all those impacted by the violence again at the US Capitol, the family and friends of slain Officer William Evans, and all those who work at the Capitol in many roles. We grieve also with those who lament losses to gun violence in Atlanta, Boulder, Wilmington, North Carolina, and the toll that these mass shootings continue to take in our country and in our souls. We hold the cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul in our hearts, and all those nationwide holding the trauma of the ongoing trial for the murderer of George Floyd. In so much pain, we gather in community to cherish signs of resurrection. Please pray or meditate with me. Holy One of many wisdom paths, Passover liberation rituals, and Easter abundance. We need the sustenance which comes from family, friends, congregation, and celebration. We long for those moments of renewed life bursting forth in spring blossoms, sunny days, time in nature. And on this day, we tell a sacred story of one whose life force did not end in death, one who lives in love and memory across centuries. We proclaim the power of the human spirit in all kinds of collective abundance. May we live as ones who claim both the beauty and the power of all that rises. Amen.
Reading from an ancient source, Matthew 27, verses 62 through 66. After the day of preparation, the chief priests gathered before Pilate and said, "Sire, we remember that the impostor said while he was still alive, 'After 3 days I will rise again.' Therefore command the tomb to be made secure until the 3rd day. Otherwise, his disciples may go and steal him away and tell the people he has been raised from the dead. Then the last deception would be worse than the first." Pilate said to them, "You have a guard of soldiers. Go make it as secure as you can." So they went with the guard and made the tomb secure by sealing the stone.
Our second reading from a modern source is an excerpt from a longer poem. This was written by Julia Esquivel, a Guatemalan poet, theologian, human rights activist. Esquivel was on the front line of justice movements in the midst of political unrest and genocide in Guatemala in the middle portion of the 20th century. The poem is called "They Have Threatened Us with Resurrection." It isn't the noise in the streets that keeps us from resting, my friend. Nor is it the shouts of the young people coming out drunk from the St. Pauli. Nor is it the tumult of those who pass by excitedly on their way to the mountains. It is something within us that doesn't let us sleep, that doesn't let us rest, that won't stop pounding deep inside. They have threatened us with resurrection because they do not know life. Poor things. That is the whirlwind which does not let us sleep. The reason why sleeping, we keep watch, and awake, we dream. No, it's not the street noises, nor the shouts from the drunks in the St. Pauli, nor the noise from the fans at the ballpark. Join us in this vigil, and you will know what it is to dream. Then you will know how marvelous it is to live threatened with resurrection, to dream awake, to keep watch asleep, to live while dying, and to know ourselves already resurrected.
The last deception shall be worse than the first. Today's reading from the Gospel according to Matthew is not one that is often highlighted on Easter morning. We usually hear the story of Jesus's female disciples visiting the tomb and being informed that he's not there, or other variations on the theme of resurrection. But this story, these 9 words, tell us something very important. It describes how great a threat Jesus was to the Roman and religious authorities. And so we have to wonder, what on earth were these leaders so afraid of? I mean, for heaven's sakes, Jesus was a scruffy, sandaled prophet from Nowheresville, and the region was full of scruffy, scraggly beard prophets. Some preached insurrection against Rome, some were executed, but many were just ignored by the empire and by the leaders of the temple. And Jesus himself, he didn't lead protest or try to raise an army. So what did he do that was so threatening? "Sire," a Pharisee said, "we remember what the impostor said while he was still alive. 'After 3 days, I will rise again.'" So what they were afraid of is that he would come back. And if he did, that he would prove to the world that he was in fact greater than death, that he was some kind of superhero, the kind you see in the Marvel universe, the ones who drop through plate glass windows without a scratch, who fall from the sky, pick themselves up and jet off to save the world. They had heard that this Jesus could work miracles. And what's the greatest miracle of all? To appear to die, but not really die. So if this prophet could survive the worst that Rome could throw at him, crucifixion, then maybe he could come back and raise an army to overthrow the status quo. And if he could come back from that, he could do anything. Marvel Universe, watch out. That's what his followers were hoping for. That's what this little nascent group of believers thought would happen. It would be proof positive that they were following the right guy. And some 2,000 years later, that question is still being asked by a lot of people who grew up or who consider themselves Christians. Are we still following the right guy? Now, look, I know my UU congregants. I know some of you out there listening today may just as soon skip Easter or focus on other holidays. Perhaps some of you would prefer to be hearing about spring rebirth and not resurrection. And I don't blame you. The backstory leading up to Easter Sunday, it's pretty horrible. It's a hard tale to tell children with both honesty and integrity. And Easter Sunday's story has its own unique problems. I mean, for most Unitarian Universalists, resurrection held up against the light of science and all that we know about the human body and death, it's just not possible. If it were possible, it would be repeatable. And so far, no one has come back from the dead, or at least come back from the dead in quite the same way, in a way that upset all the intentions and expectations that the Romans and the Pharisees had for what killing Jesus would accomplish. It's important to remember today that the custom and traditions of Easter actually begin with failure. Not the failure of Jesus because he could not escape execution and because his followers were scattered far and wide. No, it actually begins with the failure of empire. Because despite all of these efforts to suppress the Jesus story, to silence the movement that his preaching started, empire failed. We celebrate Easter today because although the authorities tried their best to keep that body down in its grave, they could not. They failed miserably. They thought by killing a man, they could also kill a movement, the movement that he began. And they thought by shutting him up in a tomb grave that those who were inspired by him would simply go away. But then 3 centuries later, his movement took over the empire when the Emperor Constantine converted to Christianity. And here we are, still talking about Jesus, standing atop the ruins of empires long gone. Those in charge back then were deeply threatened by the idea and the reality of Jesus's resurrection, but they could not grasp what resurrection really meant. So before I say anything more, you deserve to know where this preacher comes down on the story Christians are telling this morning. I believe what the biblical scholar Marcus Borg used to say when he'd say, I don't know if it happened in exactly this way, but I believe the story to be true. So with that caveat, I have to tell you, I do believe in resurrection. And by the end of this sermon, watch out, perhaps you may as well. But before we can get to resurrection, I think we have to go visit that tomb first and sit for just a moment in that cave which served as a tomb, that cool, quiet place where the story says Jesus lay for 3 days. we know something about the tomb, don't we? Because some of us may have spent a long time in a tomb-like cave of our own making. And all of us have spent the last 12 months in isolation of some sort. Our pandemic life narrowed to small screens, furtive trips never far from home, through a silent, masked, partitioned, dark winter. Wondering if every breath we might take would be the last one. Wondering that a hug could be fatal. Some have suffered terribly under this isolation, suffered with loneliness, missing face-to-face community. Others, despite the pandemic stresses, have told me that they are not quite ready to emerge from this tomb/cave. And if I'm honest, there are times when I'm anxious myself about life returning to normal, because there are some things that we have become accustomed to in this culture as normal that I never want to return to. Wondering, for example, if a trip to a grocery store might end in a mass shooting, that should not be normal. Wondering, as a Black man driving home from work and worrying about an encounter with the police and wondering if he will survive the encounter with the police, that should not be normal. The owner of an Asian restaurant should not fear for her safety. That should not be normal. And if returning to the breathless, exhausting, headache-inducing, fast-paced scurrying around that was life for so many before COVID, then whew, give me the cave, give me that tomb, give me the peace and quiet. You know, there are novelists and historians who have imagined a different ending to the Easter story, where Jesus' supposed resurrection actually ends in peace and quiet. And maybe you've read some of those scenarios or seen movies. Jesus somehow manages to survive the cross and is put in a tomb. He's alive. You know, I wouldn't have blamed him if he decided to just stay there for a while. After the betrayal of his friends, the sham trial, the horrors of crucifixion, staying in a cave where it's dark and quiet, and he didn't have to say or do or fix anything or perform miracles. I can understand that. People have speculated, what if he didn't die on the cross? Maybe he found a tunnel out of the cave. Maybe he could have arranged for a getaway to some remote part of Palestine, took up basket weaving, lived a normal life like you and me, got married, had kids, who knows? But that's not the story we're telling today. We are trying to figure out what it means to live threatened by a resurrection, that the story tells us Jesus chose, a choice that we too must make. It's not an exaggeration to state that certain things that we took for granted before COVID hit the world are dead. 500,000 and more people in the United States alone, dead. A sense of invulnerability, dead. A belief in American exceptionalism that we can fix every problem, dead. Economy, not quite dead, clearly on life support and crawling out of the tomb. But everything's changed. And here's the one thing that hits me and hits us where we live. The church, as we have always known it, is dead. And the church, as we have always known it, is not coming back. We will return to church in person, but it will be tentatively, cautiously, like Lazarus coming out of the tomb, blinking in the bright light, his grave clothes trailing after him. The church, as we have always known it, in exactly the same way, is dead. And long live the church. So what do I mean by this when I say the church, as we've always known it, is dead? I mean that it has been forever irrevocably changed by this past year. We cannot go back to the old ways of doing church pre-COVID because we've been changed. And I know there is a deep longing to be together in person, and we will get there, and it will be glorious. But now All Souls has even more members all over the world. And it would be completely against our principles to simply say to them, it was good being with you during Zoom church, but now we're in person. Hope you can come visit us in DC someday, because they are us. And hundreds of UU churches and presumably other faith traditions are understanding that this pandemic has forced us to change forever and permanently. The resurrection church will now be an experience that has to happen both virtually and in person. So what I'm saying is, to go back to only one medium is to decide to stay in the tomb and ignore the possibility of a new and different life as a church, as a resurrection church. And what I'm saying is that we are not the same body as we were before. It is new. There's a line in the book of John when Mary is weeping outside the tomb and Jesus comes over to talk to her, and she is startled and she reaches out to hug him. So starved for her beloved teacher was she. And he said, no, 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 don't touch me. He looks the same, but he had a different body. He is saying, do not cling to your ideas of who I used to be. I am something new now. That is what the church is facing right now. When we return to shared space, so much about what we love about All Souls will look and feel and be familiar. But we must also be aware of what is new and what has changed in, amongst, and beyond us. We may look the same, but we will have a different church body. It's the church universal. It's what our universalist ancestors dreamed about, but couldn't even imagine. We will have worshipers wanting to not only worship with us virtually, but bring their children into the classrooms virtually, to attend meetings and programs and adult spiritual development and board meetings virtually. We are a new body, and we cannot be threatened by this resurrection. Instead, we have to embrace it. We have to stand out in the light and say, we are risen again and again and again. We are risen. We have a new body, and we are walking out of that tomb and into the light of Easter morning. And that is worthy of a grand and glorious hallelujah. So let's go back for just a moment to that marvelous poem by Julia Esquivel. She reminds us that this impulse we call resurrection is real, that we have to come back from the grave again and again and again and insist on life with a force that flings open tombs, that strides into light, that in Esquivel's own words, she says, it is something within us that doesn't let us sleep, that doesn't let us rest, that won't stop pounding deep inside. Join us in this vigil, and you will know what it is to dream. Then you will know how marvelous it is to be threatened with resurrection, to dream awake, to keep watch asleep, to live while dying, and to know ourselves already resurrected. May it be true for the church. May it be true for you. May it be true for all of us this day. And may it be so. Amen.
heavens are not too high. His praise beneath the fly. The earth is not too low. His praises there may grow. Let all the world, let all the world in every corner let all the world in every corner sing. My God and King. The church with songs must shout. No door can keep them out. But above all, the heart must bear the longest part. Let all the world in every corner sing. My God and King. My God and King. Let all the world in every corner sing. My God and King.
I did something strange on Easter Sunday in 1987. I found myself in the Basilica of St. Mary in Minneapolis. And as I hadn't attended a service in the 7 years since I graduated from high school, just being in church was unusual. But the strange thing I did that day was that for the first time in 18 years, I cried. You see, I sort of saved up my loss of innocence for 1 week in August in 1969. There are a number of hard facts that kids must work through during the journey of childhood, hard facts that adults just take for granted. Facts like some folks having plenty while others have little or nothing. Facts like those we look to for protection, like the police or the government, sometimes actively seek to harm us. Facts like folks being injured or sick for no reason, facts like aging, facts like death. I mean, I knew all about these facts, but for some odd reason, I hadn't internalized them. Why I chose to internalize them all at once when I was 7, I don't know. All I know is that it was overwhelming, and I cried for 3 days nonstop. Then I came up with a strategy to help me cope, which was to give myself a moment to rationally examine everything that happened to me before I reacted to it. Just a little space to try to truly see what was going on. The effect of that little space was that everything was at enough distance so that nothing was ever immediate enough or close enough to make me angry or sad or laugh or cry. Fast forward. I'm a working actor in a strange city alone on Easter Sunday, and I felt that I should go to church. The basilica was close to me, and the Mass was familiar from my days in Catholic school. So I went and changed the course of my life. I was awed by the grandeur of the building and by the beauty and pageantry of the service. I was moved at a very deep level by the music. I felt touched by the sermon. But it was the little girl in her Easter dress sitting in her father's lap, the little boys in their tiny ties, their shirt tails out minutes after walking into the building, who spent the entire service merely ignoring everything that was happening and making faces at each other. It was the older couple sitting holding hands, as I supposed they had done for many years, or the young couple seemingly unable to put their first baby down, passing the little bundle back and forth the entire service. It was the whole experience, an experience too immense, too powerful to get any emotional distance from. And so I started to weep. I remember what the choir was singing, but it wasn't the words or the music. It was the life in that moment. I find myself here at All Souls most Sundays now, and I am still moved to tears by the experience. I'm still awed by the beauty of our historic building, constantly moved by the music, regularly inspired by the sermons, and always enriched and enlivened by this congregation. I come here to look for that same rebirth I felt in 1987, and I am deeply grateful to be able to find it. It is for these reasons and others that I give as generously as I can, and I hope you will too. We're in the middle of the All Souls All In pledge drive for the church year of 2021-22. If you've not made your pledge, I encourage you to do so. You can click the link in the chat or go on the homepage for the website of the website. Last year was very difficult for many of us, and our ability to give may have been diminished. So those of you who can might want to consider increasing your pledge by 10% this year to help maintain the health of this church and its work. This morning's offering will now be received.
Jesus Christ is risen today. Alleluia. Earth and heaven in chorus say, Alleluia. Praise your joys and triumphs high. Alleluia. Sing ye heaven and earth reply. Hearts are strong and voices sing. Alleluia. Where, O death, is now thy sting? Alleluia.
One thing is certain, the Easter story survives because it sends the powerful message that truth will rise, that love does win, and that when you got truth and love, there can't no grave that will hold our bodies down. So happy Easter, go in peace, speak the truth with love, always love. Amen, and may it be so. And for our closing, I invite you to get up off your couch or your chair and move your body and or your spirit in whatever way you can.
It was early one